what I really love and what helps me about the garden and the seed analogy is oftentimes we put it in the ground and then it's not fruiting straight away. Like we launch something and we're not suddenly getting 10,000 people knocking at our door. And so we kind of pull the whole thing up and we doubt it. And we think, oh, it's growing too slow. It must be wrong. But maybe it's actually just taking the time it needs to really get that root system set so it can grow strong. I think in the current day, we have a hard time having faith in things that aren't just giving us instant response, but building enough belief in the dream with enough of a push behind it that then we can go, okay, I'm going to show up and I'm going to water these seeds and I'm going to weed the space around it and I'm going to protect it. I'm going to build a little scaffold to block it from the wind and just to have a bit of faith that it is growing in its time. And the best thing I can do is continue to show up for it.
What I see in this for my clients is that, and I'm going to recommend it to most of them, is that if they're stuck at the level of dream or purpose or mission or lost or don't know what next step to take, do this as a process. Today's episode is with my good neighbour, beekeeper, ski coach of the Olympic Australian team, and author of 2 books now?
3.
3. This is your 3rd book.
Yeah.
So I invited you on because you just released this book. I was at one of the soft launches you did a week or 2 ago. That was awesome. And it's this book here, The Seeds of Dreams. So yeah, welcome. Chip, great to have you back on, and thank you for accepting the invitation.
It's always good. It's great having you as a neighbor, and the fact that we have meaningful conversations anyway. The fact that we can record them every once in a while, that's epic. Just
makes it more fun, doesn't it? And we're both coaches. I mean, you're more than a coach. You're a keynote speaker and high performance coach and author and do all these other things. But the one thing we do have in common, I love of bees and gardening, but also coaching people and getting the most out of ourselves and the most out of people. And look, to be honest, I haven't got all the way through it. I'm about halfway.
You're ahead of the game, man. It's good. It's only just beginning, so it's good. It's all right. That's good.
I'm loving it. What I'm liking, my first impression is that it's speaking to my unconscious mind, not my conscious mind. And this is what I like about you, is that you're like a bard or a mystic or a storyteller. This is how I see you anyway. And because you talk in stories and rhymes and prose, and that's the language of the unconscious mind. So it's not appealing to my conscious mind that much. And you weave in, the seeds of dreams in terms of purpose, and then you bring the analogy to a garden, and like the whole thing just maps out wonderful. And as I'm reading it, it's impacting me not at the conscious level, but at the unconscious level, and I'm noticing things inside of me are growing as I'm reading it. And the other thing I like about it is that it reminds me a little bit of The Artist Way. I don't know if you read The Artist Way.
Of course.
That's more than just a book. It's a journey, and this seems like it's a similar thing, that I'm going on a journey, and that I'm at the end of this journey, I'm not going to be the same person who started the journey. And what I love about this too, as a coach, so many of my particularly younger guy clients who are stuck with finding their purpose, or what's my purpose, what's my mission, what's my vision, and I have ways of working with them on that. But I'm definitely going to be recommending this book to all those kind of men who are looking for purpose or meaning or something in their life, because I think this book will help pull that out of them, or they may even have missed their purpose because they might not have noticed it. So I don't know where to start. Maybe I just thought what was the inspiration for the book? Maybe that's a good place to start.
Yeah, great. Awesome preamble. So interesting. I think the inspiration for the book is, I only know this now, and the way it's evolved and grown in me is very congruent with the message in a sense. So literally about 22 years ago, I had just finished working with the Australian Olympic program, and I had taken a little bit of time away from coaching athletes and was starting to move into the space of growing humans, or not growing, of supporting humans and coaching humans in other arenas, in business and in creative projects and things like that. So my coaching business, or my coaching garden, was starting to grow a little bit. So I had about a year of being immersed in other people's dreams and visions, not just athletes. And then simultaneously over that year, I'd been growing my very first garden. And it was in a raised bed about the size of this table. It was pretty simple. We were living up in Ukai. But the steps that I'd kind of had to go through to get our first crop of kale and corn and tomatoes and things like that, I just was quite fascinated with it. And so I went away for a 3-day retreat. I needed to kind of just be a bit quiet. And I just had 3 rules. I was camping out at Broken Head, and my 3 rules were no eating, no speaking, and no eye contact. I just wanted to kind of have a quiet inward sort of weekend. And so every morning I'd wake up really early and drink a bunch of water, and then I'd walk out across the headland over into some of the national park before anybody else was awake. And I'd hang out there on some of those back beaches until sunset. And then I'd wander back and climb in my tent. And it was a very cool process. And on the 3rd morning, I was sitting out there on one of these beaches with my journal, just sitting quietly. And it took a couple days for my mind to get a bit empty of all the, massive mappings of thoughts that go through, as we both know. And there I was. And all of a sudden, just literally in a kind of sort of a 10-second moment, the table of contents of this current book literally kind of fell into my lap. And it was this marrying of the steps that I'd been observing it took to grow a dream or a vision or an Olympic campaign in a human, and the simple steps that I was kind of fumbling my way through and growing in the garden and to grow, vegetables or whatever. And so it kind of married up and it matched up, and I got so excited about it. I came back and I gave a talk about it like 2 days later, and I was just like, oh my God, this is what a beautiful, simple metaphor. And I thought, I'm going to write this book right now. And I wrote kind of a manuscript, but then life got busy, and it literally sat in my cupboard, or on the shelf for about 20 years. And I felt guilty about it. I felt like I was procrastinating. I talked about it with Ash, my wife, every once in a while, and I felt like it was like stalking me, but somehow I just couldn't bring myself to write it, to fully bring it through. And about 2 years ago, that burning kind of sensation got hot enough that I went, okay, I'm going to write it. And when I sat down to write it, what was interesting, all of the guilt that I'd given myself over the years of not writing it kind of started to go away, because I realized that actually somehow the table of contents had landed powerfully in about 10 seconds, but that it had taken me the last 20 years to live into the content, and through my work as a coach and also through the many gardens that we've grown, really let that metaphor and the connection between the way nature moves and the patterns of nature and the seasons of nature move and the way humans grow evolve in me deep and strong enough that I could actually share it in the way that it's now being shared in the book.
Wow, so there's like a 20-year hiatus in between the first draft and when you sat down to complete it.
Yeah.
And, the analogy of the seed, becoming the tree, and, some trees bear fruit, within maybe 6 months, and some maybe within 15 years. It sounds like this particular seed took a while to bear the fruit that's the fruit that you have now. Were you surprised by that, how long that gap was? I mean, that's a pretty long gap.
It was a long gap. And mostly I felt guilt. Like I felt like I was letting down this like living being inside of me that was wanting a voice. But then that, as I said, that guilt just fell away.
The moment.
As soon as I really said, okay, now's the time. And I just realized, oh, now is the time. Like now is the season. And I think one of the, consolations that I feel now looking at the process is, if we look at some of our great, big, deep forest giants, like the kauri trees in New Zealand and the redwoods and even some of our big fruit trees like the avocados and the mangoes, they don't give fruit in their first season. And, for those big forest giants, they actually often will sit for decades, very, very small, while they're growing their canopy underneath. And it's only when that canopy is fully materialized and the whole mycelial network is fully set up do they start going up. And So I think that's kind of what I felt like when I leaned into the book. I realized, oh, wow, it's been growing in me, and now it's time to bring it out or bring it through.
And that brings in the metaphor of there's a season for everything. There's a preparing season, a sowing season, a watering season, a growing season, a fruiting season, a harvesting season. And so I guess things have their own time frame. And you know, I look at some of the time frames around some of my missions and repurposing and reinventing of myself, and how, you know, it wasn't the right time for certain things to emerge or evolve in me. And so I think that is a good metaphor for where am I on my journey? What season am I in? And you talk about also timing in terms of seasons. And one of the things that I'm the mission I'm on, I get really excited about my mission, right? And I noticed in your book you talked about, it was something like, I want the results now. Like, I want the fruits now.
Yeah.
But I'm not at that stage of my mission. I'm still tilling the soil, you know, tending to the plants and watering and things like that. And I guess some people, you know, I've given up on missions before. So this is I think the point I'm making is that because I'm so attached to the fruits, that in the past, once it's got difficult, and I'm meant to just be doing the daily tilling of the soil and the weeding and the this and that, I'm like, oh, this is too hard. This is too much like labor. I just want the fruits. And my tendency when things get difficult and challenging is to give up. That used to be my tendency. And then I kind of conquered that about 5 years ago when I recognized my weakness is that when things get tough, I quit.
Yeah.
And I realized that I need to work on my weakness. And so now I've chosen not to give up on things. And so now I'm recognizing that where I am on my particular mission is right where I need to be. And that temptation to give up is just the signal that this is the season when things get difficult. And I'm sure in some plants' life, they're like, it's dry, there's a drought, it's still hanging on, it's sucking the last bit of moisture out of the air or the soil. It doesn't know if it's going to make it. The plant could give up and just die. But some plants are very hardy. You know? There's those tillandsias that just sit on the wall and don't even have roots in the earth, and they just suck the moisture out of the sky. So I guess the moral there for me is to notice the season of where I want to give up, and you know, that's just the drought season or the winter when things are dark and I don't think I'm going to get through it, and then to push myself, because what I've discovered is that when I get to my point where I'm ready to quit, it's that I think, because I've put in like what I think is 100% effort, and I haven't reached the fruit, and I'm imagining that I've got to put in another 100%, but really it's only another 10%. And I think the people that don't quit break through that last 10%, and that's where I'm at now. And so I'm now recognizing that, reaching that breakthrough point and being willing to put a bit more effort in when I thought I had no more effort left, it doesn't feel that difficult.
Yeah.
I thought it was just going to be like, you know, like who's that guy, Sisyphus, that rolled the big boulder up the hill.
Yeah, then was back at the bottom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's actually not like that. Oh, no, there's challenges, but
I love it. I think there's a lot in what you just shared. I mean, we could unpack that last paragraph for the next hour, but I think a couple of things I really loved. One is this notion of recognizing that we and our dreams and our missions do have seasons. And I think in the modern commercial world, there's so much pressure to be delivering all the time and at a cadence, which is, for most of us, I don't think it's really sustainable. I see it in a lot of the organizations I go in. They don't really honor the seasons, even the annual seasons, and they don't start well. They don't complete well. They don't harvest when things are ripe. They don't acknowledge the great work. You know, they just are hammering along. And so I think just the first thing that you said is just actually recognizing, wow, my life or my mission does have seasons, and tuning into what is the season that I'm in right now. You know, I think as we've shared, I lost my dad about 6 weeks ago, and interestingly, you know, I was in a big harvest moment in my work and in my business. And that event kind of threw me into a bit of winter, right? Not so much dark, but just still, like, I've actually, it was like an ice age moment, and it kind of like changed the current season I was in and called me into a quiet space. So sometimes things happen which shift our seasons. And then there's just the natural flow of things, like you said. And what I really love and what helps me about the garden and the seed analogy is, you talked about, the risk of basically pressing your dream to fruit too soon. I think that's one piece. So I think oftentimes we put it in the ground and then it's not fruiting straight away. Like we launch something and we're not suddenly getting 10,000 people knocking at our door. And so our tendency is to like pull it up by the roots. And instead of just, as you said, tending it, showing up for it, continuing along the way, we kind of pull the whole thing up and we doubt it. And we think, oh, that was the wrong place to plant that, or I shouldn't have planted that then, or, oh, it's growing too slow, it must be wrong. But maybe it's actually just taking the time it needs to really get that root system set so it can grow strong, and powerfully. I think if we rewind back a little bit, the other place that of high risk, I think, for a lot of people's dreams and missions is, when you first have an impulse, when you first had the idea around certain aspects of your mission, there's a time, I know for me, where that dream is mine to nurture quite quietly and kind of in the safety of my own veranda, water it, keep an eye on it, keep it out of the harsh winds, keep it out of the foot traffic that people might step on it, and really give it the time it needs to get like settled before I plant it in the world. And I think sometimes in the early days of a dream, we want external validation. And so we share the dream and we share it with people that might not fully get the big picture. Yeah. And then their opinions or their expectations of us or their perception of what's possible based on their life can have a massive influence on, our belief in the dream. And so, I think those two places, one in the very beginning when the dream's young, giving it the space to grow, nurturing it, watering it gently and protecting it a bit from the forces of life. And then once it's in the ground, once we've planted it in the world, similarly, be careful about who we share it with initially, and then just water it with a bit of faith, know that it's going to work its way through the seasons, and it's going to take, we've got our time frame, but it's got its time frame, and we need to honor that too.
I think, is belief one of the steps? Yeah.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, having belief in your dream. And I have faith and belief in my dream. That's not lacking for me. I catch myself saying to my clients, my coaching clients, look, I'm really results focused. And because it's true, I am. It's not a sales pitch that, look, I'm going to get you results. It's more that's the way I am. And then I've just heard something new about that, because I don't like process. I'm too results focused, and I'm amiable in the social styles. There's 4 social styles, amiables, and what amiables need for growth is to initiate processes. And this is the bit that I'm a bit reluctant and resistant to, and I notice it. And it was what was holding me back in my business, was that I just wanted the fruits. I just wanted the results.
Interesting.
I just wanted the clients. I just wanted this working now. I wanted the money in the bank, I wanted the successful bit, but there's all these processes, but I'm process resistant because process is more detailed. I'm kind of like this big picture guy, right?
Yeah.
And so I've had to learn through my own studies and recognizing that what I need to, for my growth, is to sit back, not be so results driven and be more process orientated. And that's definitely working for me. I've had to learn that. And that's all in your book about all the preparation, tending the soil. It's not just you put the seed in and out comes the fruit.
Yeah, that's it. And I think I think that you're not alone, in wanting the fruit. And I think I see it a lot in the sport, in the high performance sporting space, and in business. The bottom line or the end result, the outcome, the Olympic medal or the podium finish, is the result we want, and it is the promise of the coach and the program and all of that. But it's interesting, day to day, they don't talk about it. they're not talking, the coach isn't saying you got to get on the podium.
Right.
The coach is saying, let's get warmed up well. The coach is saying, lift your eyes and, relax your shoulders a little bit. The coach is focused on the process.
Yeah.
And he or she knows that, and the athlete knows that if we just do these simple steps and with discipline, knowing where we want to go, that actually the outcome's going to unfold. And actually the place to put the energy more and more and more is in the soil, right? It's in the little things, because that's ultimately where the big things grow from.
It's all coming back to timing. So keeping the focus and the attention, because where focus and attention goes, energy follows. So if I'm keeping my focus and attention on what I'm doing in the moment, which is process, results take care of themselves. The fruit are going to come.
Yeah.
It's not the season of fruit and harvest. And so I put my attention on results.
Yeah.
And so my energy goes to results, and my energy needs to be going to process.
That's right. And you could be pulling on these little fruit a bit earlier, before they're ready to be, before they're ripe, right?
Yeah.
But I would imagine, I'm sure what I know of you and your work, that when you're in the moment with your clients,
Yeah.
when you're actually in the field of play, you're right in the process, and you're not thinking, maybe you are. You're not thinking, how they gonna feel when they walk out of here in an hour. You're just right in there with them, right?
Yeah.
Because
Correct.
if you stay there with them, and if you take breath for breath with them, they're gonna get where they need to go.
Hey men, isn't it time you took your lovemaking to mastery level? Are you ready to impress your intimate partner and leave her fully satisfied yet wanting more? My Sexual Samurai program is designed to put you back in control of your sexual energy. Imagine being able to generate your full sexual potential, sustain it, and then direct it at will. In just a few weeks of disciplined practice, you'll master voluntary control over your sexual orgasm. You'll also learn how to integrate the hidden aspects of your sexual shadow, empowering you to step into your full masculine archetype. Whether your problem is performance anxiety, premature ejaculation, or low libido, or you're just wanting to step into your full masculine, my Sexual Samurai program is for you. Head to the Shadow Work Academy via my website, or check out the show notes for more information. When I'm with a person, I'm really with them, and
Yeah.
I'm really hyper-focused, and I'm almost in their world.
Yeah.
And I think that's some of my superpower. If I have a superpower, it's like I'm in that person's world for a moment, and they get that I'm in their world. And a lot of my clients come to me for coaching, and this is another one of my superpowers. It happened yesterday. Someone I've not worked with before came in, walked in the room, sat down, started crying. This is my superpower. People walk in, they look at me, and they just start crying.
Yeah. That's awesome.
I could take that two different ways.
Yeah, that's right.
But the way I take it is that they feel safe around me, and that what they need is to just release some emotion so that they can get present to what's going on for them and actually start talking about it.
Yeah.
But I've known this since I was in my 20s.
Interesting.
That people just step into my world and just feel that they can start crying. And they can, because I'm a clearing for their emotions.
Amazing. Well, I would say that you maybe some of the detailed processes like spreadsheets and stuff might not be your specialty, but clearly you're laying the groundwork for people to come into the garden of your work, because they're, a bit like when someone comes for a walk in my garden, they're like, whoa, they instantly are like, it inspires them to want to grow a garden, So if people come in your room and they feel safe instantly without even starting to talk, to start crying or do whatever, what I love is that clearly they wouldn't be that if the soil of this space wasn't fertile.
Yeah.
And who you are. And then I guess the other thing that I get curious about is then probably one of the gifts, which we do get in life and we also get in the garden, is that I'm sure a lot of times where your clients go surprises you, so you wouldn't have predicted that person came in and that was their doorway. And then where that whole session went, you could never have predicted it, but you're present enough to allow it. You're not so locked into process that you miss the big thing that wants to unfold.
That's a good point, because I sometimes feel guilty with my clients that I'm not going in with a plan. I should be coming in with a plan for the session.
Yeah.
And sometimes I have an idea what we're going to work on, and based on what their goals are. And other times, no, I don't think I need a plan. In fact, I think a plan's only going to get in the way. And so I just become a clearing.
Yeah,
I just prepare myself for just being a clearing for a possibility or something to show up. And then I think the clients pick up on that clearing.
Yeah.
And it's just a garden bed.
Yeah.
I'm not particularly after any particular result sometimes or any particular fruit. And so, yeah, I think that sometimes works in my favor, not to have a plan.
Yeah, I like that. And it's a little bit like, as you said, probably sometimes, if it's a client you've worked with before, you might have some intent, you might come in with some intention or, know, a little bit. So, I might, for example, plant a row of lettuces because I know that this particular, garden bed gets a lot of sun and it's going to really like it. But then when a papaya tree grows up in the middle of there, I go, oh, I didn't plan for that. Huh. Okay, well, that's what's growing. And if I'm present to that, suddenly I realize, oh, well, that papaya tree, even though it was unexpected, wasn't even invited, it's shown up. It's kind of overridden the plan, but suddenly it's also providing a bit of shade for those lettuce leaves in the hot summer sun. And they're somehow allowing the initial intention to unfold, but in a way I wouldn't have imagined, right?
And something maybe even more majestic can manifest in that space that I had planned for lettuces, but it was the perfect conditions for a papaya to emerge.
That's it.
So it's the papaya's space to occupy, and I had other plans for that.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's a part of having a purpose and a mission, isn't it? Because we if you've got a goal, they say, well, you need a plan, and then you have this plan, but you can't be too attached to the plan. This is what this is suggesting, isn't it? Because other things will emerge along the way. Like you were just saying you're in the middle of a harvesting period in your business, and your father passed away, and then that shifted your focus to something that was more present and needed your attention more.
Yeah, big time.
Yeah, I'm just curious if it's not too personal to just ask that. Like I have a question, like just a question mark around, because my father's 88 and he's in pretty good health, but I suspect he'll probably get to 90. He wants to get to 91 because his sister got to 90. But I'm already anticipating, like, how am I going to feel like when my father passes? And I'm not asking you particularly how you feel. That's not the question. It's more like what season is that? What's that as a season? Like when the tree that bore my fruit or was the seed for my growth.
Yeah.
That tree has moved on.
Yeah.
And so can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. It's super, super on my mind. And I speak a lot with my brothers about it as well. It's interesting, I think, because my dad's health was fading over a few years. In my mind, conceptually, I had started to let go of him, right? And I had sort of thought, oh, I probably won't be there when he passes because he lives on the other side of the ocean. And kind of conceptually, again, or intellectually, I'd kind of like processed things. And in the end, I was able to completely reroute a trip that was going to Africa to go to LA and be with my dad for the last 5 days of his life. And that experience, it penetrated my whole system in ways I never would have imagined. Like mostly profoundly beautiful, but also just deeply, deeply penetrating. And what I'm kind of left with, and I think why I referred to it feels like I'm in a winter, is I got really clear of those little elements of my dad which run really strong in me. And then I also got clear of the elements that are unique to me as a tree in the world. And there was something kind of seismic about him passing back into the earth, and suddenly I'm standing and he's not, and I don't even really have words to describe it except that it's felt like a kind of like a seismic event in my being, like an earthquake in my being. And I don't even know if it's a grief. Haven't really studied grief so much, but I don't feel sad, but I feel super raw and super open and super connected to him. And just like a bit vulnerable.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So some vulnerability there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also some strength.
Totally.
Yeah. Yeah, I went and saw that guy, the Grief Walker. You know the guy I'm talking about,
Yeah,
Canadian
Stephen
guy.
Jenkinson?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Did you just go to his talk in Bangalore?
I had a podcast conversation with him, actually, yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Because he says that grief isn't an emotion, it's a state. It's a state of being.
Interesting.
And that the emotions are a way of dealing with the state of grief. And so, I can feel grief about different things, and it's like a state.
Yeah.
And crying doesn't shift it for me because crying deals with the emotion of sadness.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really move the grief. And
yeah. And I think there's something that does certainly tie back to the garden. I don't think we're great at endings or at transitions, and as a culture. And what I learned from the garden is that when something dies or when something goes to seed, it goes back into the garden and it feeds the whole garden system. And then the seeds that we save from it, that feeds future generations, and it allows us to grow more and more. And I think sometimes we carry a lot of fear around. It's easier to celebrate the beginning, the birthing part, because we go from that sort of formless space into suddenly we have a beautiful baby that we can look at and feel and hug. I think when we go from the form back into the formless, it's a bit more mysterious, and I think we miss the gifts, and I think one of the things I've noticed and why I'm quite happy to feel like I'm in a bit of a winter right now is that it feels like it's giving me the opportunity to see certain aspects of my life and to recalibrate things in a way that I otherwise wouldn't have. So it's like it literally is a pause between seasons, and kind of suddenly the garden beds are open, and Ash and I and Josh, we have a chance to sit and go, okay, let's take a deep breath and see what wants to grow next.
Right. So you're still in it, aren't you? Because it's very fresh, and you're in the experience of it, and there's a vulnerability there. I can feel the vulnerability in you there. Yeah. It's beautiful. I love vulnerability. I think it's a sign of strength. If you can feel your vulnerability, it's awesome. It kind of, you talked about that you got present to the parts of you that are like your dad, and then the parts of you that are more unique to you. And there's a bit in your book where you talk about the fruit doesn't fall far from the tree, but then you go on to say that with apples, if the apple fruit falls under the tree, it won't grow there, that it needs to move to different conditions. And so, and then I think the metaphor I got out of that is that sometimes we need to relocate in order to grow. And that's certainly been the case for me. I mean, you're from Colorado, aren't you? Yeah. And you've grown here, haven't you?
Big time.
You think you would have grown as much if you'd stayed in Colorado?
I think it would have been very different.
You would have been a different tree.
I think so. I mean, I think I'm curious. Sometimes I wonder, but for me, I can see because of the geographic distance, because as an apple, I rolled down the hill and, I got planted here in Australia. I can absolutely see ways that I've just felt free to grow in ways that I might not have if I was always surrounded by the people that knew me and had grown up with me. And, and one of the gifts that I received in being here is, kind of growing up in Colorado, everybody in my world really knew me inside of the ski sporting world. That was one of the primary contexts through which I was known and seen to people, and through which I saw myself. And coming here allowed me actually to just be a human outside of that context and grow in all sorts of ways. I think
sometimes being anonymous can be a good new start.
So powerful.
Yeah. I relocated. I'm from Perth. I relocated here, and I actually lived in Los Angeles for 10 years. And interesting, astrologically, there's this thing called ley lines. You may know about them, and it shows you certain ley lines show you where you're going to grow. And I've got one that runs right through Byron, and I've got one that runs right through LA. And there's nothing running through Perth.
Right.
And so, I love Perth. It's where I grew up. My family are there. And when I moved here in 2012, I was a trauma therapist. That was what I was beginning, my next reinvention of myself. I was a nurse before that and a counsellor, and I got into trauma therapy. And I've been here for 12 years and still do some trauma therapy. And in the middle of that, I went back to Perth for a year. And I hung up my shingle as a trauma therapist, and I didn't get a single client. There was no call for what I do. And here, I'm booked out and inundated. And
isn't that interesting?
Yeah. So, Byron's known, globally as a place to come for healing and things
Yeah.
like that. And so maybe that's got something. Maybe that ley line signifies that. But I guess the point for young men who are looking to don't be scared to relocate in order to grow your dream.
Yeah, I think it's can be really helpful, particularly because of that piece that I was talking about before. When a dream is young and little, oftentimes it's those people that are closest to us that can look on the new, fresh dream with particularly critical eyes, and because they see us or they know us inside a certain lens, and if it's a new, fresh dream, one, they might not be able to see outside of what they know us as, and two, it might subconsciously make them feel uncomfortable to know that we're growing something new and different outside of what they know us as.
That's what I feel in my gut, not even in my head. I don't think about it, but when I go back to Perth, it feels like I can't grow there. I can't breathe there. What I need, like the nutrients I need to grow, even though I was born there and had my childhood and quite a bit of my life there, I left when I was 30 to go. And when I lived in LA for 10 years, like I grew a whole other side of me. But this part of me, my current mission, there's just I don't feel that. The conditions aren't ripe for it. And it has got something to do with the way my family or my friends perceive me there.
Yeah.
And under that perception, that would stunt my own growth, because who I'm becoming, which is as the flowering of who I am, that can't happen, like you say, if the beliefs of those around me or the lens they see me through prohibits that or doesn't allow for that.
Yeah, that's right. And or if their voices are always there doubting that, why would you do that? Oh, that's not the Pete that I know, and all of that. It makes you start to question the very thing that you feel inspired about.
Yeah, and I don't get that here at all. Like here, like the things I choose to do are really supported, and I felt that the whole time I've been here. Like the things that I'm into are really supported in this community, so it's the right garden bed for me to thrive in.
I think it's great. And and then probably I notice for me when I go back to the States or back to Colorado, there's people that have known me my whole life, and some, I know, I need to take the time with this person to reacquaint myself to them and to give them space to reacquaint themselves to me and who I've become, so that we can actually update our perception of each other. And then other people, I realize that would be a harder work. And so, I just, I don't bother kind of going all the way there, because I realize that I might end up walking from that conversation feeling like I've just justified who I've become instead of being celebrated for who I am.
Yes. It's funny when you travel and you go back, it seems to me like, and people say, oh, you've changed a lot, and they don't experience that they've changed much. And the feeling I get is that, they're still wonderful people, but I'm like, yeah, they're still quite homogenous, or still and maybe that's their growth, and that's the way they express themselves. And yeah, I guess for me, it's just for me to live my dream has required me to travel, and it's pushed me into new horizons, and there's been risks involved, and some people are a bit more risk averse and aren't interested in traveling, and maybe they're thriving in the garden bed that they're in, and I needed different things. And
I think it's great that you have a acceptance of different people have different walks and different gardens, and I share your experience of, there is something about deeply immersive travel or changing location, or kind of just going, having a really powerful experience that's outside of the box that really can expand who we are. And then the journey becomes, well, how do I take this elixir or this new part of me and reintegrate it back into life, or create a new garden bed from what I've just discovered?
Yeah, I guess it's the whole hero's journey thing, the call to adventure. I got the call to adventure and I answered it, and I keep getting new calls to adventure, and I keep answering them. Yeah. And some people may have one or two calls to adventure in their life. Some people ignore that maybe, I think some people do. And
Yeah.
And when I'm coaching clients, if they get a call to adventure, I'm always like, pick up the phone, like answer that call.
Yeah.
But that's just looking at it through my lens because that's what worked for me, and that may not work for someone else.
I think it's, I just think on that, one of the things that's interesting is, you've obviously developed an appetite and an ability to step into the unknown and to step out of what feels comfortable. And I think that's probably at the core of it. What stops a lot of people from answering the call to adventure is it requires a step outside of what they know.
Yeah.
And in a way, sometimes the longer we stay in one place around all the things we know, the more reluctant we are to step outside of it. But even someone who's answered many, many calls, I'm sure every time you hit the edge of what you know, you still get visceral responses of, oh, geez, it's still uncomfortable. But maybe you've just now associated that discomfort with breakthrough and new discovery and new adventure and excitement, whereas other people that haven't had all the reference points of the great things that can come from saying yes to the call, they got stronger stories that just want to keep them safe and comfortable.
Yeah, that's if I go back to social styles, 25% of people, there's only 4 social styles, so there's pretty much 4 ways people engage in the world that, it's not 100%, but it's true across some dimensions. And so my weakness, I talked about earlier, is that I give up when things get tough. Other people's weakness isn't that they give up, it's that they avoid. When things get hard, they just avoid them.
Yeah.
I'm not avoidant at all. Like, I've thrown myself into all sorts of situations. I've looked under every stone and in every crevice, and if there's a bad smell, I'm not going to avoid it. I'm going to go and investigate what that is. And that's been my approach to life. I've just been this curiosity and years of psychedelics, every psychedelic you can do, and put myself in all sorts of crazy situations around that. Traveled around the world a few times, explored different cultures, different religions, different, things. And so I think that for some people, when the call to adventure comes, they avoid it because they're avoidant by nature, or that's their weakness. And in order for them to step into that call to adventure, they have to overcome the weakness of being avoidant. They have to notice, first of all, my weakness is avoidance, and that's what's holding me back.
Interesting. Yeah, super interesting. And I think as I listen to you share your story, I also get that, because you've had such a wide array of experiences, you have all these reference points that point to the fact that, wow, when I step outside of my comfort zone, when things don't go to plan, when I think I'm going this way, but suddenly a whole other pathway opens, good things happen. Interesting things happen. Amazing things happen. Wow, I never would have got there if I had stuck to my plan. So your whole reference point to the unknown is I'm sure you've had ups and downs, but it's so open to it, which would also make one of the reasons why you'd be such an excellent coach, because as things unfold, you're not trying to guide your client to where you think they need to go. You're kind of like, whoa, we're going up the mountain. Let's go. I'm in, So I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I'm not risk averse. I'm happy to take risks. And I think you talk about risk in your book, and there's a part where you're talking about the steps in building your purpose, and you're following the table of contents, which is the path from the seed to the fruit and all that. And it's about taking action. And it's an important step, and it's a critical step. And this is where a lot of people get stuck. They have the dream, they prepare for the dream, they believe in the dream, they do all the other things, and then when it comes to the action, that's where some people get stopped.
Yeah.
And it's quite a critical thing. And I've certainly been stopped at that point before too. And this is where, as a coach, you know this, if you want new results, you need to take new action. It's just coaching 101.
Yeah.
And people want change, but people don't want to change. And so, like, when I'm coaching, I suggest they take new action. I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
But you want this goal, but you don't want to do that action.
Yeah.
And so it's to take the action, I think, requires to have some appetite for risk. But I think the other component of that is commitment, and that you need to commit to act. It's like sitting on you got that parachute on and you're sitting right there in the door of the plane, and you're not going to go on that ride unless you jump, and they won't push you. You've got to jump. And it's like, you got to commit, or you're not going to have that, I've never parachuted. It's one of the things I'm not into.
It's one of those risk elements you're not drawn towards.
But and you draw the analogy even with plants. Like, plants have to risk the weather and the elements and all that. So can you speak a bit in terms of action, risk, and commitment?
For sure. I think, and you kind of touch on, in a way, 2 layers of action, which I think are key to get right in a way. That initial leap out the plane, or that initial kind of, go from my known space into the first steps of the dream. A lot of people get stuck there, for sure. And I think the reason why, it's sort of like we're sitting outside of a room, and it's a dark room, and the lights of the room are only going to turn on when we're like 3 steps in. And so we're worried that as we take our first 2 steps, we're going to trip on the furniture that's in there, and we can't see the furniture until we're in. And I think a lot of us just sit at the doorway and we kind of squint. We try to squint and hope that our eyes adjust enough that we can see enough to take those first few steps. But I think part of the nature of taking on something new is that first step is a blind one, or is one that is actually more of a feeling-based step. It needs to come from a place of commitment. And it's always going to be a bit edgy, but I think it's why, in the contents, we take some time to build the clarity of intention, to really open to not what's the world want from me, but what wants to grow through me. Like, what's rising up in me that I can accept and then believe in, and put enough of my understand why it's important. If we get those kind of things, that engine built inside of us of having real clear intention and kind of noticing what's coming and recognizing, wow, it's really important, then that fire can really help propel those first steps. It can get us leaping out of the plane. So that building that fire doesn't stop the risk and doesn't stop the fear, but it's like the catalyst that can help us move through that first layer. And then I think the other type of action, which you referred to, is that kind of wax on, wax off action, the showing up for the dream, the giving it time, creating a practice, like a daily rhythm that's feeding the dream, even when it's not giving us results. And I think in the current day, we have a hard time just having faith in things that aren't just giving us instant response, but building that enough belief in the dream with enough of a push behind it that then we can go, okay, I'm going to show up and I'm going to water these seeds, and I'm going to weed the space around it, and I'm going to protect it. I'm going to build a little scaffold and to block it from the wind, and just to have a bit of faith that it is growing in its time. And the best thing I can do is continue to show up for it. And I think that plateau is an unknown space. Sometimes when we first start an idea for a business, in our mind, we're going to be off and running with our first 100 clients in 6 months, and maybe it's going to take 2 years, or maybe it'll take 1 month, maybe it'll be quicker, right? But we can't always dictate the way the universe is going to respond to our dream, or the pace, but we can show up for it. And I think that gives it the best chance to grow.
Are you curious about how working with your shadow can improve your life and your relationships? Every Tuesday night at 6 p.m, I host a confidential live Q&A call where you can ask questions, access resources, and receive personal coaching from me. I have so many people come to me ready to do their shadow work, but they tell me they just can't afford the financial investment of one of my programs. So, to make professional shadow work accessible to as many of you as possible, I've created the Shadow Work Academy. The Academy is an online space where you get instant access to my inspired community of like-minded individuals doing the work and taking full responsibility for their lives. You'll have the opportunity to hear other members' stories and share your own. Within the community, you can post your questions, challenges, and breakthroughs, as well as seek professional support and guidance from me personally on the live weekly call. Within the Academy, you'll also find my men's sexual mastery course called The Sexual Samurai and my introductory level shadow work course, Shadow Boxing Level 1. Access to the Academy is 100% free until December 24. If you join before then, your access will be free for life.
Yeah, I just, as you were talking, I saw what was the seed that started my current mission. I was already coaching, but I was doing it in a certain way. And COVID hit.
Yeah.
And lockdowns came in, and you couldn't see people face to face. And I thought, how long is this going to go on for? And is there going to be another lockdown? And I'm not going to be able to see my clients to face to face. I need to generate an online. I need to put my services online. I didn't want to do that because I love the intimacy of one-to-one work. And so it was kind of that necessity. I might have to take this online. I don't know how long this lockdown is going to happen. Is there going to be another pandemic? And so my partner, Beck, bought me a book by, I think her name's Tina Towers, and it's make six figures in 6 months and on a $5,000 budget. So I read that book. I'm like, that's me.
Yeah.
That's what I want. I want to spend $5,000. I'm going to follow all the steps. I'm going to make 6 figures in the first year.
Yeah.
So I'm 3 years in. I've spent $100,000,
Right.
not
You've
5.
spent the 6 figures.
Yeah, I've spent the 6 figures. It's taken way more than, look, what I'm doing is what she was suggesting, you can sell a course online and make 6 figures in a year with $5,000. And some people probably have done that. Yeah. But what they're selling may be something that, people that's $10, and if 10,000 people buy it and it's something, you got something that people want, you could create that. That's not what I'm doing. And so my products or my offerings are something that people don't even know that they want, and they don't even know what my offering is. And so it's a longer journey. And
it's a deeper, richer garden, right? So it's...
For me it is. And
like when I listen, and I want to hear the rest of the story, but the first impulse that I get is, a couple things. Firstly, sometimes dreams come out of necessity, right? Sometimes it's not always just like, ooh, I feel inspired, I want to go do this. Sometimes we have to fucking do it,
Right.
and life calls us to grow something because if we don't, we're not going to have food to put on our table, literally. And as you were describing the 6-figure course versus the Pete Isaiah offering, it's almost like that 6-figure course is like a garden bed of lettuces and radishes that you can grow in 6 weeks, and you can have them on your table, and they give you salad every night. But if you want to grow avocados, or you want to grow mangoes, or you want to grow even papayas or bananas, takes longer. It takes more setup, takes bigger footprint. But then when a rack of bananas is, you got 250 bananas, or when a macadamia tree, gives its fruit to us, we got enough macadamias for 3 years, so it's a bigger, deeper thing, and it takes more time and more seasons to fully cultivate it.
Yeah, I think there's a quote in the book. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go in a group or something like that. Go together, right. And so I'm taking people along with me for the ride, and, I employ a team of people. I can barely afford to employ that team. I'm basically spending my life savings to build my business, which is, risky, but I'm not risk averse, and I believe enough that this is going to bear fruit and is bearing fruit. I'm 3 years in, I haven't paid myself yet, but I'm paying my staff because I'm playing a longer game, and I'm bringing people along with me for the ride because I do have enough belief in what I'm doing. In terms of commitment, I learned this, I think, in my 40s, this concept of what it takes to actually commit to something. I was doing a coaching program at the time, and they talked about, because some people get stuck like in procrastination or paralysis, and they just won't act even though, and so the two things that helped me visualize this, and I'm quite visual. One is that a commitment is when you go to an island and you get there, you burn the boat.
Right.
So there's this concept of burning the boat. I'm like, oh, I get it. You're not committed until you've burnt the boat. If you've still got the boat sitting there, you've got options open. And the other one that I heard around the same time was that you've got to throw your hat over the fence. I'm like, what do you mean throw your hat over the fence? Well, imagine there's a 10-foot fence and you try as you might, you can't get over it, but you're wearing your favourite hat.
Yeah.
And if you throw your favourite hat over the fence, you'll find a way over.
Yeah.
So that were two things that sometimes just that slightest change in perception is the thing that tweaks you. Go, oh, now I know what it means by commitment. I've got to go all in. I can't have a plan B or C or D or E. And so part of my process has been narrowing my focus onto one project. And before I had too many things I was interested in, and I wasn't moving.
Yeah.
It's like the analogy is the pot of gold is 20 meters under the ground, and I'm digging 21 meter holes,
right?
Wondering why I haven't hit the gold. And so that was the point when I chose, okay, I'm going to focus on trauma therapy.
Yeah.
And I did that for 12 years. And then out of that came this, now it's about coaching people about how to work with their shadow. And so now that's become my single focus.
Yeah.
And so your purpose or your mission can change over time. But for me, what's worked is committing, going all in, taking the action, being willing to go through the process, and be single focused.
Yeah, I love it. I really love it. I think there's a lot in what you just shared. I really love the purpose piece is an interesting one. I think, I was thinking about it the other day. I think we're probably the only species that asks that question. What's my purpose? And I think there's a clue in that, right? When we look at other species, particularly species I spend a lot of time with, whales and bees and even the garden, every plant, there's a blueprint in each of those beings as they come into the world, and they're never questioning, what am I here for? They know they're here to fully express the gifts that they have. And so it's interesting. I think there's different perceptions and perspectives of what purpose is. Joseph Campbell said, follow your bliss. And Andrew Harvey, the Rumi poet expert, he says, follow your heartbreak. Find the thing that just breaks your heart and follow that. Dear friend of mine in the U.S., movement master Paul Chek said, find the thing that you would give your life for and live your life for it. So everybody's got different perspectives. And, I think what I love is when I see people that I know that I would say they're living their purpose, it's not attached to a career. It's not attached to the job. It's more the way they're expressing who they are in the world in all moments. And it expresses itself through the job, and it expresses itself through the career, but it's not like, once I started my job as the journalist, then I found my purpose. It's like, wow, who I am is the expression of my purpose, my reason for being here. And then our life gives us all sorts of opportunities to express that in different missions, as you said, and different phases of our career, which do require commitment, right? But I really love also the other thing is I was thinking about commitment as you were talking about throwing the hat over the wall and burning the boat. And I noticed this in the garden. There's a couple lessons I got around commitment with the garden. First of all, I noticed for years and years, I grew gardens just on the edge of our field, little garden beds, on the edge of our field. And at that time, it was quite synonymous. At the time, I was doing work out in the world, but the things that I really, really cherished the most, like my dreams, I was kind of growing them on the edge as hobbies on the outside, And I had a permaculture expert come to our house one day to kind of walk my land with me. And he was, I wanted to see what, how could we make the most of our land? And he walked around and he's like, oh yeah, these are cool. This is cool. The way you got all these veggies growing on the outskirts here. That's interesting. And I said, well, if this was your land, what would how could we make the most? He goes, well, right now you're growing some food, but if you want to grow your food, like if you want to grow your food, like build a food production hub here that will feed your family for generations, I'd be building your garden right here. And he was standing right in the middle of our field. And while he was there, he etched out this, this 12 by 12 meter, square, which was basically right in the middle of our field. And when he left, I thought, wow, that's an interesting reflection on my life. Like, what would it look like if I put my dreams and passions, the things that I hold the closest to me, not on the edge of life when I got a little bit of time, but right in the middle of the field. And it's really been part of the process as we've been growing the garden there. I've been moving things that have been sitting in the edge into the center, and it's more risk, right? It's more exposed.
Yeah.
It can be seen.
Yeah.
And that's where the sunshine is.
Right. Yeah, the analogies to speak to my subconscious. This is what I love about this kind of work, the work you do in your book. Because, you could write a theoretical conversation on a logical step-by-step thing about how to get from A to B.
Yeah.
And it won't speak, it doesn't land, for me anyway, it doesn't land. When I hear the analogy, I'm like, oh, I get it now. It's like I can flirt around the periphery and the skirts of who I am in the world and play around there, just testing the water. I can just dive right in the deep end and swim and have just frolic in the water.
Yeah.
And it's that, but that is, I am more seen and there's more risk. And like you say, I'm in the sunlight and exposed. And that's a big fear for a lot of people.
Massive. But probably starting the podcast, setting up this space, the whole shadow boxing, that's you bringing your garden into the middle of the field, right?
Yeah, I'm definitely exposing myself more and more. I talk about private things like my addictions, in my website, and I talk about them on my podcast. And I'm vulnerably revealing parts of what I call my shadow.
Yeah.
Just to mainly for several reasons. Like, this is what I've discovered about shadow work is that the more comfortable I am with my shadow, like, I'm actually get comfortable to reveal aspects of it and reveal it. In the same way someone like Russell Brand will talk about his womanizing and his addiction issues, and he knows that frees him and liberates him. And it does. I mean, like, the guy's really successful talking about what a rat bag he's been.
Yeah.
And I think people hear something about the rat bag in themselves that they identify with him.
Yeah.
And
it gives people permission not to be perfect and to kind of go, wow, actually, I've got these aspects in me. And
then this is why I think the superhero story is one of the prime stories in archetypal stories in all cultures. It's because people identify with the hero, but a lot of people also identify with the villain. And then the really smart ones identify with both. And they get that the reason that story is so impactful is because it's a shadow conversation.
Yeah.
Is that we're both the hero and the villain. And that when we can see that villainous side in us, like, it can show itself in addiction or lying or cheating or having affairs on your partner, all these different ways that people have these shadow bits of them or bits they feel shame or guilt around or are uncomfortable with, that when, I don't know, maybe they're like weeds in the garden or unwanted plants, but even the weeds have a place. And so for me, I am showing up in all of myself. This is the journey I feel like I'm on, is continuing to disclose and reveal more of my true self and my authentic self as a way of liberating myself from some sort of constraint.
Yeah.
And it's risky, but I feel like I'm on the journey, and I don't feel like I want to get off, and I don't know where the boat's heading, but
I think it's really brave and also feels probably essential given the work that you're guiding people in. I think, when I bring leaders each year to Tonga, I have a role as a guide in the water and a guide of the process and a guide of their experience. And I'm in the water with them, and I'm in it, and I'm crossing my own thresholds, and I'm thinking about the same themes that they're thinking about. And there's something about that, I think, our willingness to walk shoulder to shoulder with the people that we're with and show up. I think that helps.
Yeah, that's the other reason I do it. That was the second reason. One is my personal reason because it liberates me. But the other thing is that I'm leading by example. Like if I'm a shadow work coach and I'm asking people to reveal their hidden shadows, if I'm not willing to do that or if I'm not demonstrating that I'm doing that, then, what's that?
Yeah, that's it. That's it.
I heard recently someone said that everyone can be a coach because everyone's qualified to coach people in at least one thing. Because everyone's good at something.
Yeah.
And if you're good at it and someone's not good at it, you could probably coach them in that regard.
Yeah.
And, I've been a therapist and a counsellor and a nurse, and the thing I relate most to is coach now. And, I like the metaphor like the greyhound coach. It's a coach for me is a vehicle that gets you from A to B. And so when I'm working with someone as a coach, I'm like, they're at A and they want to get to B, and I'm going to be the vehicle that helps them get there. And when I think about you being the coach of the ski team, and your particular thing was downhill freestyle,
yeah,
downhill.
Freestyle, yeah.
So you get people from the top of the mountain to the bottom of the mountain the fastest possible way.
With some big jumps along the way.
Right, so that's a specific kind of getting someone from A to B. And then I also heard this thing which I think speaks to the way you weave imagination into your book, and I think this is a quote by Einstein, is logic can get you from A to B, imagination can get you everywhere. And when I'm reading your book, it's like it's speaking to my imagination.
Yeah, beautiful.
And I feel, I could get another book on how to live your purpose, and it could take me step by step logically.
Yeah.
But this is not this at all. This reminds me very much of like the artist way. And
beautiful.
After each chapter, you've got this like points of reflection and exercises or tasks or take action here. And they're metaphors around the garden. And like I said, I'm yet to finish the book.
Yeah.
But once I've finished reading it, I'm then going to digest it.
Nice.
Because some books are for reading and some are for digesting.
I agree.
And this one is, I'm going to immerse myself in what you've created here because it speaks to a part of me that words can't. Yeah.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I love that. That's a massive, massive compliment. And I think it's interesting. I can relate very much to the Einstein quote. And, in my coaching space, in organizations and things, there's if I'm leading a workshop with a group of people, sometimes it helps to share a model or a concept of something, whatever it is, of 4 quadrants and different elements, and helps people's mind get their mind around something. But I notice that if I just share the concept, if I just share the model, people will get it up here, they'll get it in their mind, but it's not going to change the way they live. It's not going to change the way they lead. It's not going to shift their perception of life or themselves. But as soon as I share a personal story or help them get access to their own story, suddenly it takes the concept from up here and it pushes it down into their experience. And then it starts to come alive inside of them. And you can feel it, when someone starts to live a new idea. It's very different than them just understanding it. And I think as coaches, that's one of our opportunities, is kind of help people. And sometimes it has to start. Some people are very intellectual, so it helps them to get some cerebral understanding before they'll let go. But then ultimately, whatever we can do to get into the experience, it's always gonna drop in deeper, and then it's gonna give them a chance to live something new into their life. So I love that that the Seed of Dreams is starting to come alive in you in that way. We're actually gonna do a workbook with it, so that people can take notes, and we're working with the publishers on this. But I think the few of the pages are going to be plantable, so that when you've captured your thoughts, you can put them in the garden and flowers will grow from them. Wow. So we're working on that. That's our little technology of seed growing.
Plants are amazing. I just got. I'm looking forward to the workbook too, so I'll do that as well, because I believe in the concept of it's not just information.
Yeah.
It's experiential, and information speaking to logic. But if you go through an experience, it's like you say, you feel that, and then something moves.
Big time.
I'm only halfway through. I'm open to spoiler alerts. I'm sure there's a chapter on harvest.
There is indeed. There is indeed.
I don't want to spoil it for the audience or the people who haven't read the book, but you're obviously here to talk about
we can
the
talk
book.
about it, yeah.
What do you want to say about harvest?
Great.
What's harvest about? Give me your concepts around harvest in terms of the garden, but harvesting life.
Yeah, great. I think I'll just share one key thing for me that is big with this, and I see this inside of high performance arenas where it's very goal driven or goal oriented, where people are working towards something specific. But I also see this in life, that oftentimes we're so fixated on where we're trying to get to that a couple things can happen. One, we kind of hold positive reinforcement and gratification and celebration and acknowledgement like hostage until we cross a certain line, and we don't recognize the steps that we're taking along the way, the little things that that actually can help us build momentum in a dream. We kind of go, well, once I get to this place or once I reach that, then I'm successful, then I've made it, then we've accomplished our goal. And we kind of hold out harvesting, and it's sort of like, right at the moment I've got a plum tree that's in the process of harvesting, and every sort of day there's 5 or 6 like glorious plums that are coming ripe. And if I didn't pick those plums each day and eat them and share them with friends, I should have brought you a few, sorry, they would drop to the ground and they would rot. And by the time the whole tree was harvested, we would have lost like 9/10 of the plums, because they don't all ripen at the same time. So I think one of the pieces around the harvest is opening our eyes to recognize the steps that we're taking and celebrating, acknowledging, recognizing those steps as they come and owning them, and not just waiting till the very end, because at the very end, there's not going to be very many plums left on the tree, right? That's one. And then the other piece is, it's a little bit related to my dad's passing. I think oftentimes we miss the harvest. We miss the moment of honoring when something has come to its true completion, because when it gets there, we're already thinking about what's next. And we're so fixated on planting the next thing that we miss that this beautiful dream that we've been growing in our life is flourishing right now. And in our mind, we're thinking, yeah, but I got to take the next hill. And so we miss that moment of honoring what's got us to this place. And not only does it we miss a chance to feel good, but when we pause to honor something and celebrate it in its flourishing, whatever that looks like, in the celebration, in the honoring, we get to reap the whole journey and carry the whole journey and all the learning with us. If we don't honor and allow, something at its completion, then we can, we either miss the gifts that it gave us, or we end up kind of dragging the whole thing into the next season, weeds and all, if that makes sense. So
wow.
Yeah. Are you with me?
Yeah, I'm a little bit impacted, because what comes up for me around, so you were on your way to Africa when your dad passed.
Yeah.
What were you going to do in Africa?
I was halfway there. I was in Sydney,
Yep.
about to board a flight, and I was going there for an offsite retreat of an organization I work with that was bringing people from 20 different countries together for the first time ever. So it was a big piece of work.
It's a big deal.
It was a big deal.
It's a big deal, right? Now, your dad's unwell and about to pass, and you have this big deal that you're on. Now, I can imagine myself in a similar situation going, well, this is a big deal for me. Like, I'm in the middle, I'm about to harvest, something I've been growing and cultivating, and dad's unwell. Did you think for a moment to not go to your dad and to go to the thing? And then did you make a decision and then chose to go and be with your dad? Did that happen?
Yeah, and there was a great catalyst. So I hadn't talked to my dad for about a week, and I hadn't seen him. on FaceTime, and I tried to reach him before I left, and then I was in my layover in Sydney when I got through, and I saw him, and he just felt different, and he said to me only a couple things. The first one was, I was really hoping. And that was all he said. And I don't know what the other half of that sentence was. But in my mind, it was to see you, you know?
Yes.
But then I was conflicted because he was one of the hardest working people in the world. And I know there was a big part of him that would have said, oh no, you should just keep working, just go, you know, like you should be doing what you're doing. Right. I want you out in the world, go, you know. And so I got off the phone with him, and I was kind of just pacing. Do I call my client? And I was really kind of unsure. I was feeling a pull. And literally in that moment, Josh, my son, sent me a text, and he didn't know much of what was going on. He had a little sense that his grandfather was moving in that direction, but we didn't know timing at all. And he sent me a text, and he said, "Hey, Dad, I love you so much. Firstly, I know that you and your dad have a beautiful relationship, so there's nothing you need to do, and you should just feel total at peace. Whatever you need to do that. And I just wanted you to know that if I was ever in this position and it was you, I'll fucking be there."
Wow.
And that's kind of what happened to me. And it took about 3 minutes before I'd canceled my Singapore Airlines flight, and I'd walked over to the Qantas desk and bought that ticket, and it was amazing. Because as soon as that decision was clear for me, you know, the ticket was purchased. I was on the plane in like 45 minutes. It was a full flight, but somehow there was a seat right next to me, and I felt like I sat down right next to my dad. And then, you know, I landed, and it was like an eye blink, and I was with him. And
it was kind of like time stood still, like you were already in the the experience.
I was in it, yeah. And my beautiful client, they were so gorgeous, and I guess this is a lesson for me, right? It was the perfect, what do they call, like Gregorian knot. It was unsolvable, you know. Yeah. Someone who, you know, like impeccably likes to keep people happy and deliver on my commitments and follow through on what I say I'm going to do, and
even your dad, who's a hard worker, say go and do that.
So, you know, it was so hard to kind of like make the call. But then what was amazing was the client was, one, they were just completely supportive from the moment go. And then two, we had, because they were in Africa and I was in America, we had the chance to talk on a couple evenings when I was, you know, everybody was asleep in Santa Barbara and they were just waking up to start their days. And I somehow was able to connect in with the whole journey, support the leaders to lead the process that I was going to be leading, and then pipe in at a few key strategic moments. And interestingly enough, I mean, the whole plan was for me to be there in person with them, but somehow me being where I was added a whole other layer of context and meaning to what they were doing in Africa. And so the work itself was super potent and everything got done. So it was huge.
Moments like the sliding door moments, aren't they? And and Josh's text at that time was pivotal.
So pivotal. Yeah. Hard to see in that moment, but as soon as I'd made the moment, it was so clear. As soon as I made the decision, and then as soon as I was on the plane going, I could see, wow, any other choice, I probably wouldn't have made it in time.
Right.
You know, it would have been, would have gotten complicated straight away, you know, and so.
Were you right there at the bedside when he passed?
Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I realize that's private.
Thanks for asking.
And then, so my last question, you mentioned there's ways in which you like your father, and there's ways in which you're uniquely you. What are the ways in which you like your dad that speak to you or that you see or that, and even now that he's gone, that's probably even a more pertinent question, possibly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Two of the things that I really loved about my dad as a son, but also just as a leader in the way he kind of helped me in my path, was he was just a beautifully generous listener, and he had this way of listening, and I could share what was going on for me, and I now realize this is who he was for everybody in his world. You know, I could share what was going on for me for 30 minutes, and he would listen, and then he would share it back to me in like 3 bullet points. And somehow it was all captured, but it was also deepened, you know? And he had this way of sort of seeing possibility in people that sometimes even the person couldn't see. And so through the listening and through the sharing back and the asking, it helped people see who they really were a little bit more. And I didn't realize it so clearly, but I can see that a massive amount of my work is around that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you are a very generous and attentive listener. I think that's true for you. And I think that the striking thing about you, I can have a tendency towards dark themes and strongly a shadow coach, but even negativity and this and that. And even when I try and get you to go there, it's like, I'm staying here in my lane, you know, like I just see the possibility for good and light and that, everything. It's like a real beautiful feature of you. And, you know, light and dark bring balance to each other. And, you know, maybe you've done the dark stuff in the last life and you're here to keep bringing the light, you know. And so I think you're a wonderful listener, but I also think that you're always speaking in terms of what's possible. And, you know, as much as my personal journey is about going into the dark, and look, you know, what just happened recently, just have a political statement. I have to say something political before I finish my podcast. What I saw happening in the American election recently was I thought we were heading into a second dark ages. And because where I thought it was going to go if that election had gone a certain way, and other people might have the opposite view than what I have. And I think the way it went, actually we're probably going to avoid that second dark ages and we're going to come more into a new age of enlightenment, if anything. And I saw the other side as evil or dark. And so my summation of this is that light always conquers dark, or good always conquers evil. And I'm happy to sit and go into the dark places because I feel that's my purpose or that's mission, to explore that, to see what I find there and to bring it back to the tribe. And if they're interested in what I found in the dark places, I'm happy to share with it. They don't have to come with me, but they can come with me if they want. And then I see you're more working in the realms of light and the possibility of light. And I think in that way it's probably one of the things that we resonate with each other.
I think so, Yeah, I think so. And I mean, some of my that moment for me, you know, I don't not experience the shadows and the darkness. But I think what you said, when I go in there is something inside of me that knows that on the other side of that, or once I'm in the dark space, I'm going to see a perspective that's going to help me get to a brighter space of light, right? You know, so I can see and I can go in those spaces, but it's really with it's like a cord that's
right.
That's like I'm rappelling down into the cave, knowing that it's, you know, that I'm coming in here to get a perspective that's going to enable me to return in a way.
Yep. But always returning to the light. Yeah, you wouldn't go into the abyss if you didn't think you're going to come out the other side.
Yeah.
I think there was that one thing where a guy was coming down the mountain. What was that? And he fell, I think, into like this crevice. And I think he had a broken leg at the time. We made a movie about this.
Oh,
These two
yeah.
guys were coming down the mountain.
Yeah.
Do you remember this?
Yeah.
And one guy broke his leg and the guy cut the rope.
Oh, yeah.
Great movie. And there's one point where he slips and falls into this crevice and he can't go up. It's impossible. And down is like the abyss.
Yeah.
And he went down. He didn't just stay where he was. He went down.
Yeah.
And down led out.
Yeah. Interesting.
Down to the bottom of the abyss, he found a way out. And found his way down the mountain with a broken leg. And the other guy had given up on him. And so, yeah.
I think there's a lot in that. And I think that, I mean, going back to the hero's journey, I think it's, you know, we can try to partially go in the cave, but, you know, when we go all the way in, we have the possibility to go through. I think, you know, and I think you do that every day. You know, you're doing that.
Yeah, a lot of my clients come to me when they're in the belly of the beast, like they're rock bottom. They've had the thing happen to them, the divorce, the bankruptcy, the illness, the whatever.
Yeah.
And that's when they seek shadow coaching. It's like, oh shit, I need to have a real good look at myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's where I'm meeting them. You know, I've been there, and most people go there at some point in their life around something.
Yeah.
And that's fertile ground for me.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, you've hit rock bottom. The only way's up. It's kind of, I guess, it's not too different like that.
Yeah, it's cool. I love it. I love it. Whereas I might meet my clientele are kind of pushing towards something in an achievement space, but oftentimes, even if they're at that 95th percentile, what's in that last 5% is going to require a visit to the cave.
Oh, right. Okay.
Because it might be the one thing that's blocking them is some
Yeah.
aspect of themselves that they're suppressing or blocking.
Right.
That actually there's power in there, but they're just, you know, for whatever reason have been conditioned to stay away from it. I'll be sending them to you.
When my clients are ready for high performance, I'll send them to you.
Awesome.
The Seed of Dreams, where can listeners get one of these beautifully bound? It's also beautifully produced.
Feels gorgeous, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Really,
it's embossed,
feels
and
good.
the texture, quality. Where can someone get a copy of this?
So here in Australia, the books are currently making their way out into bookstores, and my publisher Blue Angel is doing a good job of that on the ground, doing a great job of that on the ground. And I think in December or January it goes live on Amazon, and then it will be live in the U.S. and Europe early in the new year. So depending when this podcast comes out, for those who are listening, the other thing that will come out early in the new year, because of what you just described as the book really is a journey. It's a process. The opportunity is for it to be a process or a journey. So we're putting together a sweet sort of guided course program that people that want to read the book and then be mentored or supported to take some steps that come from the book to really nurture and cultivate their dreams. That'll be available out through my website. So
there'll be a course that you can take. This is different from the workbook.
Yeah.
This is like an online course?
Yeah, like an online course.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I think I'm only halfway through, so I don't know the total of what I see in this for my clients is that, and I'm going to recommend it to most of them, is that if they're stuck at the level of dream or purpose or mission or lost or know what next step to take, do this as a process. Just do the process and see what comes of it, because I think you've hit on something really archetypal here, and I think you might have a bestseller on your hands.
Thanks, Pete. I love it. Thank you so much. It's such a gift to talk.
Yeah, I always love chatting with you, and so thanks for this opportunity.
Yeah, awesome.
Cheers, buddy.